If I cast my mind back to my days at school when I was that young boy, and I think of literacy, I started to really have difficulties when I was about 8, 9 years old. And in English classes, we'd have to stand up and read a paragraph of a book. And I really struggled, and I found it very belittling, very humiliating. The teachers knew that I struggled, and I could hear the other children laughing. So it broke my confidence down. When I left school as a boy, I was 16 years old. Did I struggle how to read? Yes, I did. Did I struggle how to spell? Yes, I did. But you know, I was very fortunate that I entered a world where I didn't have to read or write. I entered a world of cooking where I expressed with my fingers. And so therefore that built my confidence. Over the years, I've taught myself how to read. I've taught myself how to write and how to spell. And if I'm really honest, is I still struggle with If I'm honest, I really struggle absorbing. So therefore I can read a letter, I can read a book, but I don't absorb. So everything I've read, I've forgotten. But for example, if you read to me, then everything you read to me, I would remember. And so therefore, I suppose I suffer from word blindness, which is a form of dyslexia. I turn words back to front sometimes, like for example, on, no. So therefore, it's how I see things. So I still struggle, but I have to read very slowly. And because I read slowly, and because I struggle to absorb, I tend not to read, even though I have thousands of books at home. They're all giant picture books. I remember once being called into my son's school. My son had to be tested for dyslexia. And so I sat down with the headmaster and the teacher, and my son was dyslexic. And they went into great detail about dyslexia. And that's when I realized, and I was able to label myself as being a dyslexic, because they could have been talking about the same boy but many years previous. But when I was a boy, they never spoke of dyslexia. You know, it was still very Victorian, very Dickensian. You know, it was all about suppression, about a form of bullying really, because teachers in the 60s, in my opinion, in the early 70s, were great bullies. And they, in a sort of strange and sadistic way, they took pleasure out of seeing me struggle and the others in the class who struggled. Everybody in London knows that I must have the oldest phone in London. Why? Because it's simple to use. But do I send texts? Very rarely. And if I do, it takes me a long time to do it. I'm very aware and very conscious that I'm not constructing my sentences correctly. Do I send emails? Never. Do I send texts? Never. Why? If I'm honest, it's because I struggle to construct my sentences, and I'm not confident within my spelling, even though I know I spell. I was very fortunate that I had creative ability. I was very artistic. I've always been very visual, and maybe that's something to do with dyslexia. I'm not sure. So therefore, I entered into this world where I cooked, and I expressed myself through food, with my hands, with my imagination, being very visual. And that's what elevated me up through the ranks. But as I've always said, success is born out of luck. Luck is being given the opportunity. It's awareness of mind that takes advantage of opportunity. Had I entered a world where I would have had to have read and written and spelt, I don't think I'd have done so well, because it would have held me back. But using food was what gave me the confidence to become the man I am today. And also, I was in the French world. So I learnt more about writing and reading in French than in English, so I was fortunate. So if I made mistakes, who cares? It was French. Lots of young men and lots of young ladies, they leave school, and they do struggle to read and to write and to spell. So the advice I would give them is find a world to work within which intrigues and captures their imagination, a world where they can express themselves with their fingers, and they will do really well. Because one thing I've seen with dyslexics, they're incredible at multitasking. If I think of all my chef friends who are exceptional in the kitchen, they were all dyslexics. I think what the Evening Standard are doing is creating awareness. And by creating awareness, it dissolves the embarrassment. So young men and young women are not embarrassed. It's not a stigma to be labelled dyslexia. Dyslexia and individuals with dyslexia have great talents, they have great qualities. And I think by creating this awareness, it dissolves the embarrassment and then gives the individual the confidence to want to learn. They may never be the quickest readers in the world, they may never be the best spellers, but what it does is it dissolves that fear. So in later life, when it's necessary to be able to read and write when you're in a management position, you have the confidence to do it. I think what gave me the drive to succeed was my insecurities. Reading, writing, struggling. It gave me that individual drive to prove myself because I'd been belittled at school. I'd never been taken serious. I was always looked upon as being a fool, as being stupid. So it was the fuel behind me. And that's what made me work far harder, was to prove to my father and other individuals, including several teachers, that, you know, maybe I struggled with reading and writing, but I had and possessed other great qualities. And so had I been dealt with as a child, I may never had the energy or the fuel to drive me to get to where I got.